Well, just 3 videos back on the channel, I showed an old and large antique Navaja. Now let's do the same with a different one. This time, though, we will do it as a thanks to Todd Elner, who supported my latest book campaign. And as you can see, the knife in question here is a beauty. This one is from the second half of the 1800s. It's over 10 inches long when it's folded and over 19 inches long, 19 and a half when opened. In this very old illustration of a Navaja duel, you can see the fascination with the size these things would get up to. Obviously, it's exaggerated there, I would say. The real adoption seems to have been starting in the early 1700s, and part of this is about restrictions being put in place on carrying swords and other offensive weapons, armas blancas. But this replacement theory might partly explain the predilection for going big. Most agree, however, that the really extravagant, just ridiculously large examples were just for show. The word Navaja in Spanish is kind of a catch-all for different kinds of knives. And as you can imagine, it has a Latin root because this is a Romance language, but a navaja de afeitar was a knife for shaving, or in other words, a razor, like this one here, the old-fashioned straight razor. Here's some other really old examples. So these are old enough to have been the inspiration for the classic Spanish Navaja fighting knife, kind of the world's original tactical folder. As someone mentioned in the comments of the last video, and that's correct, it gets mentioned a lot when it comes to the Navaja and its history. It was really ahead of its time in that sense. So like I said, there were other kinds of Navajas. You could have a Navaja cortaplumas, a knife meant for sharpening and trimming your quill. But when these folding fighting knives started to become popular, it wasn't difficult to draw an association between them and the Navaja de afeitar, the straight razor, because they both fold into the handle. And that's how these got named. Interestingly, the purpose statement built into some of them, some of the predecessors, that tradition did not get kept, and it just got called a Navaja. We should point out, as many articles do, though, that folding knives were not a new thing when these were invented in Spain. We're looking at ones from ancient Rome right now. So long before the second half of the 17th century invention/popularization in Spain. But this isn't the exact same thing, of course. Navajas have a unique set of features, and the knives we're looking at here would make pretty poor fighting implements. And just like this 1765 kind of proto-Swiss Army knife in a way, but from England, that I showed on my channel previously. Again, very old, centuries-old folding knife, but nothing like our current object of focus. And let's take another look at it, and we'll take many more, of course. Gorgeous piece of work of French manufacture, by the way. And these things really caught on in Spain to the point that foreign markets started making them for export to Spain, and then even for people within those countries. And we can see the French mark right there. These were, at least originally, particularly associated with southern Spain, Andalusia. Well, that's how someone speaking Latin American Spanish like me would pronounce it, Andalucia, in Spain. I always feel really awkward when I try to do the actual Spanish accent. But it seems the fighting use really started up in this part of Spain, possibly with the gypsies. But if it started with them, it certainly didn't stay with just them for long. So it became a common weapon, especially with thug types, barateros, basically the kinds of thumb breakers that would collect on gambling debts. And the ones from places in southern Spain like Malaga and Sevilla were supposed to be pretty famous for using them. Now, they ended up getting used by all levels of society, but this underworld association definitely remained, and part of the lore is how the very distinctive ratcheting sound that the classic configuration makes when being unfolded was something that would chill your heart if you were walking down a dark street. And let's take our antique here and see what that would have sounded like. Pretty awesome. Now you can see here on the back, notice the spring lifting up? Well, it rises and falls over a series of pinions, which are called teeth, dientes, causing that very distinctive sound. Now, you don't need that kind of ratcheting mechanism or motion in order to have a folding, locking knife. In fact, you obviously have to go to more trouble to build those dientes, those teeth, into the base of the blade. So for instance, here's a Navaja that I bought in Spain with the mechanism that eventually took over for the ratcheting, and you'll notice it's going to click just once. The leaf spring on the back, which I'm going to show you, is basically the same thing as in the antique. It's just that it gets, there it is, it just gets lifted and dropped one time per open and one time in reverse for a close. You'll also notice a simple lever is put in place to help lift the spring for the closure, as opposed to the ring that you pull back on the antique. So imagine this ring here being pulled right back towards the camera. Eventually the ring was discontinued. It could catch on things accidentally, it could break over time. Anyway, notice how, again, there's a spring at play here. That's really the most important part. That's why these are called navajas de muelles also, or a navaja de siete muelles. Siete being 7. One thing that, every article talks about the navaja de muelle. They mention that term. I couldn't find one that explains what that means, because when you go to various Spanish dictionaries online, muelle is a dock, like a wooden dock out on a lake. And then I'm trying English to Spanish dictionaries, trying words like teeth, spring, locking, etc. No use either. And I do speak Spanish. I might be missing something obvious, but I just had never heard that word before. So I finally found that a colchón de muelles, colchón being the word for mattress, is a spring mattress. I was like, okay, so muelles can mean spring, and that's why these things were called navajas de muelles. Spring knives, kind of. And I felt like I had done my due diligence, mystery solved. And you can see the term muelle here in this article, and you can search for Navaja de Muelles online and very easily get results. But then I was thinking, one of the sources I checked in researching this video definitely said muelles means molar teeth, which is not correct, but it was a thread worth pulling on. And this publication is the one I was thinking of, so this is online. It's from OregonKnifeClub.org, and that might not sound like the place to get expert knowledge about navajas from, but the author, Kelly Lane, lived and made knives in Spain for 13 years. So, got some valuable intel there, and it is a very good article, but this is the place, if you can see it here on screen, that mentions muelles as molar teeth. At the top of the image there. And when I read that, it didn't stop me down, I just kept moving on. It didn't seem like, it's not like I was seeing the word dog in place of the word cat in Spanish or anything. So now, as I looked back, I was like, well, why didn't it stand out to me as such an obvious translation error? Well, a couple of reasons. One, the actual word for molar teeth isn't that far from it, muelas. And we can't just discount that word like, okay, that has nothing to do with it, it's just muelle. Because remember, the pinions that give the ratcheting mechanism that sound, that telltale sound, were called dientes, teeth. Well, that seems like it might be more than a coincidence. And oh yeah, all I had to do was look at the blade of my knife that I purchased in Toledo, Spain, and it has the word muela right on it. Now, of course, that's a brand name, but did the brand name come from some historical term for these knives? I may be making a mountain out of a molehill. Somebody from Spain, a knife expert, could probably straighten this out for us. But then again, it does seem like an obviously unaddressed, unnoticed question, if you will. There's definitely some etymological fun to be had with these, then. And no, we're not done with names, and that is because the distinctive ratcheting kind, I've used that word a lot, were called caracas very commonly, and a caraca is a rattle, so that one's not hard to figure out at all. And remember, we talked about how it takes extra work to produce that rattling sound and mechanism, so what's the point of all that? Well, apparently, just to sound cool. I found one Spanish source that makes that claim, and unless I'm really missing something, that would be right, because again, there's no functional reason. You don't have to have it do that. And we're looking at the handle here, a little bit of a view of the back spring. Boy, these things had a lot of names, because they would also be called santolios. Santo, as I'm sure you know, is the word for saint, so basically this was a joke about holy oil and getting the last rites after you've been cut down by one of these bad boys. We haven't talked about all the accidental real estate on the bottom end of the handle. That's only a result of the needed size and shape to house the blade, but that gives you fighting applications, as you can tell. I mean, goodness, there's quite a bit down there. Striking, hooking. A credit to Matt from the Scala Gladiatoria channel for mentioning that in his video. His video is worth checking out for sure if you want more information. It doesn't have any of the name game research type stuff, but then again, I speak and read Spanish, and it confuses me. And let's get back to our antique. Obviously, this was made to be sold at a nifty price. This is not a cheap workman-like fighting knife or multi-use tool. It has 2, maybe 3, depending on how you want to count, notches in the blade. Make of that what you will. The Navaja's large blades and clipped points are often said to be the inspiration for the American Bowie knife. Let me read to you from a book called Sevillan Steel. Navajas crossed the hands and drew the blood of soldiers and sailors, rogues and ruffians, and diplomats and aristocrats, both in and out of Spain's borders. The use of the Navaja fostered a mystique not only from Sevilla's back streets, but also from the seedy waterfronts of Barcelona and the cosmopolitan promenades of Madrid. These were said to be used, and were, during France's occupation of Spain as part of Napoleon's expansion, the Peninsular War. One of the greatest artists of all time, Francisco Goya, famously now but secretly then, captured the horrors of that time in Spain with his print series Los Desastres de la Guerra, The Disasters of War. This print here, plate 34, is called Por una navaja, for a knife. In other words, this man, a priest, is being executed for the crime of possessing a navaja. And this whole insurgency was called the guerrilla, like little war, diminutive, and that is where the term guerrilla warfare comes from. Back to our specimen, check out the largest of the notches in the blade that I was talking about earlier. Again, the French stamp, and speaking of that, regarding foreign makers, I read that the French versions of navajas usually did not have a locking mechanism, but ours certainly does. And a quick look at the back of the blade. And that'll do it for now. Well, once again, thanks very, very much to Todd Elner. I hope you enjoyed the video, man. And this one and the last will definitely not be my only Navaja videos. I found some other cool stuff I would like to get into in future installments. Well, thanks again.